Welcome to What We Really Want, Conversations about Connection, brought to you by Awaken. We're a gospel-based 12-step recovery community, and we're dedicated to helping people live the lives they were created for. So settle in and get ready for a great conversation. Let's talk about what we really want.
All right, here we are. It's happening. Episode 1. Welcome to What We Really Want, Conversations about Connection. My name's Greg Oliver. I'm the director of Awaken. We are bringing you this podcast. If you don't know what Awaken is or what we do, we would encourage you to check out our website at awakenrecovery.com. Sitting across the table from me is my wife, Stacey Oliver, co-founder of Awaken. Say hi, hon.
Hi, hon.
Everybody's just feeling really excited and not self-conscious at all about being in front of these mics. And then to my left is Bobby West, who is our assistant director. Hey, Bobby.
Hey, Greg.
So we are talking about what we really want. And we're going to spend this first episode talking about why a podcast, what is Awaken, who are we. I know that some of you who are listening to this are already friends, already a part of our community. But hopefully, some of you who are listening are brand new to connect with us and have no idea what Awaken is and don't have any idea who we are. And so we thought it would be a great idea to just take the first episode and let you get to know us and what Awaken is and why we do what we do. So right off the bat, Awaken is a recovery ministry, and we focus on recovery from sexual addiction, sexual brokenness, unwanted sexual behavior. There's a lot of labels and terms that go along with that. And then everything that kind of goes along with sexual brokenness, betrayal trauma on the part of partners. And we're centered in Birmingham, Alabama. And a lot of times when you talk about being a part of recovery ministry, people will ask, well, how did you come to choose something like that? Bobby, have you ever had that question?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah? Like, how does it come up in conversation?
I mean, usually people ask, what do you do? What do you do for a living? I'll tell people about the ministry that I work for, and depending on how interested they are in it, a lot of times I'll be like, well, I was in the ministry for myself for many years before I came on staff. So that's kind of typically ends up what I kind of keep it brief unless I realize that they want to know more.
Yeah. What kind of questions have you gotten over the years, hon?
I used to, in the beginning of when I would meet somebody, I would pour out what we do and why we do it. And then I realized, wait a minute, I don't need to tell them why we do this. So then it was like, what do you do? And I would say, we work with or for a recovery ministry, and keep it very brief. And then let them ask. And hopefully they won't ask what type of recovery.
Hopefully they won't, or hopefully they will.
Yeah, because I don't know that they really want to know. And so when they do ask, I tell them, and then I either get, oh, that's amazing, or weird looks, and they go, nice talking to you, and they walk away.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just what do I feel like divulging today if somebody asks me?
For me, it depends on what kind of mood I'm in, because I met somebody one time, and they were like, well, what do you do? I said, I help guys quit looking at porn.
Oh, geez.
And they're like, you can get paid for that? I'm like, yeah. So just for those of you who are listening, who are just getting to know us today, all three of us are doing recovery ministry as our job, as our calling, whatever you want to call it, because it's just the next chapter in our stories. Eventually in this episode, we're going to get to answering the question, why a podcast and why now? There's definitely some good answers for that. But we wanted to kind of start out by helping you get to know us a little bit, because every one of these episodes is going to be a distinct conversation with someone about a different form of connection, healthy connection. And so we're not always, all three of us, going to be on the podcast, but depending on who our guest is, different combinations of us will be. And so we just thought it'd be good for you to get to know us a little bit. I'm happy to go first.
You get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I've been in recovery for 15 years, since early 2009. My background is I've been a Christian. I'm 53 years old, been a Christian since I was 6 years old. And for over 25 years, I really struggled with unwanted sexual behavior that eventually turned into full-blown sexual addiction, out of control. Nice little coexisting reality for me was that my sexual addiction was growing out of control while I was also serving in full-time ministry. From a very young age, I had a deep interest in music and grew up singing in the church, being involved in youth choir and singing solos. And in the 80s, when it was like the heyday of singing to an accompaniment track and just really having the big dramatic song, I loved that. And I actually loved the attention that I got from it. But deeper in my heart, I really felt like that was a way that God had kind of wired me to connect with people. And so I really wanted my life to be about, serving the church in that way. And so I went to Bible college, grew up in Huntsville, Alabama, went to Bible college in Birmingham, Alabama, and got down here in 1989, met Stacey at orientation, and we started dating that next spring. But I was preparing to go into working in the church. And after I finished up at Bible college, that's exactly what we did. We served in just a small non-denominational church in South Louisiana for a few years. And it was a really kind of a good place to just get your feet wet in learning how to be in church ministry. It was about 200 people in the church and tiny little, small town. And I was the youth and the worship pastor, which, by the way, don't ever make somebody do both of those jobs at the same time. It's just awful. It's hard to do both jobs well at the same time. But for 3 years in that church, then moving back to Birmingham, and then shortly after that, 11 years on staff at a church here in Birmingham. And during all of that, one of the things that was going on for me was just this growing, escalating problem, hidden problem with sexual addiction. Stace, how much of what was going on in my life were you aware of?
Absolutely none.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
None at all.
Right.
Didn't even know to ask questions.
Right. Well, and we'll get to your story in a minute because you kind of came into this pretty sheltered, probably arguably more sheltered than most because of your upbringing. But there are some people whose stories involve like constantly getting caught by their wives and having that kind of cycle going round and round. That was not our story. Stacey didn't really know anything to speak of until she knew the whole thing, which wasn't until we'd been married 17 years. So that was great. But I have come to realize that one of the big contributors to what caused me to want to sort of check out, numb out, medicate was not knowing how to process stress or difficult emotions in my life. And it's obviously a bigger story, and we're not going to focus on like going in super deep on any of our stories today. But just knowing that whenever I felt stressed, like I wasn't measuring up, I hated that feeling. I wanted to do everything the right way, and when felt like I was failing, I just didn't know what to do with those feelings. And so what I would do is just escape into something that would make me forget about them for a while. And for me, that wasn't alcohol or drugs. It wasn't gambling. For me, it was something I could keep much more secretive. And so beginning when I was very young, it was just compulsive masturbation that grew into a porn problem that eventually grew into an ever escalating problem where eventually I did what we call crossing the flesh barrier, and I acted out outside of my marriage physically, and it was just out of control. And all this time I'm serving in ministry and trying to keep those parts of my world separate while I try my hardest to figure out a way just to stop doing what I'm doing. For a long time before I got caught, I was no longer under any kind of illusion that this was manageable or controllable anymore. I knew it was out of control. I had tried everything I could think of. And I think I knew that there wasn't going to be any way out except for somebody else finding out. And for me, that was not an option because there was too much to lose. There was too much at stake. And so it was just resulting in a miserable way to live, just kind of running out the clock. And when you're thinking about running out the clock when you're 38 years old, that's not great. But God, in his mercy, I believe, exposed it because I made a mistake a careless mistake in acting out that was really not the kind of mistake that I would have made. I was really good at covering my tracks. And he brought it into the light, exposed it. And this was January 2009. And it really did blow our whole world up. I lost my job in the church. We really lost touch with a whole lot of people that we were at that time in community with. And it's like, where do we go from here? What's going to happen? The great thing is right away, we were really blessed and fortunate to be able to connect with a wonderful therapist. And she helped both Stacey and me realize what had been going on. She helped us to understand sexual addiction and helped me to begin kind of reconciling my faith, some of the messages that I had been taught over the years about just about psychology and use of things other than the Bible to try to fix your problems. And I think I had a real bias against things that I now believe to be very, very helpful. And so it's like all of a sudden now, without secrets, the change that I've been looking for was starting to happen. And I was able to finally begin to dig deeper into like, what has my heart been desiring? And, for the title that we came up for this podcast, what is it that I've really been wanting? And began to discover some of the answers to that. And 15 years later, I'm still discovering the deeper answers to that. What do I really want? Because what I had been settling for wasn't what I really wanted, but it had taken up so much space in my life to where I couldn't see past the clutter and past the chaos to get to what it was that I really wanted. And so it was just great to finally be able to have that freedom in a context of recovery and honesty and also support, because, not only did my wife choose to stick with me, which was an amazing thing that I didn't deserve, it was a blessing that helped make my path, I think, easier. But I just was able to finally, without all of the distractions, see what it was that I really wanted. So that's a little bit about me. Hun, why don't you, since you're the better half of me and a part of the story that I've just been telling, talk a little bit about kind of what life growing up was like for you and just how what you really wanted and the way that you were trying to find it. It looked different from mine, but some of the same types of experiences. We'd love to hear a little bit of your story.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when you were sharing. Like, I kind of was doing the same thing and going for the same things, but in different ways. So my parents are originally from Pennsylvania, or I'm originally from Pennsylvania. My parents grew up there. They became...
You never know it from listening to you now.
I know. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. They became Christians when I was 5, and they got into a church there nearby their home, and they met some missionaries, and they just decided they wanted to do something huge for God. So they sold their house, and they joined this mission board. And when I was 9, we moved to Africa. So I grew up in Senegal and Liberia, West Africa.
I'd say that qualifies as something pretty big.
It's pretty big. Fun fact. And I would say that if you asked me about my experience, it was amazing. I loved living there. I mean, there were, of course, hard things at 9. Going to a third world country was horrific in some ways because, it smelled, it was hot. I didn't understand the language. I had left. Mainly, I was just sad to leave my grandparents because we moved around a lot while we were getting ready to go. So I didn't really have a group of friends that I was leaving. But once I adjusted, I really loved it. We played outside all the time. We rode bikes. We climbed trees. It was just, we didn't have any, it was 1980, so we didn't have any luxuries, I guess. And it was a third world country, so we didn't have electricity, we didn't have running water, or any of that. But I loved it. So anyway, grew up, graduated from high school in Liberia, and then I came back to Birmingham to go to Southeastern Bible College where I met Greg. And people always ask how I ended up in Alabama. So my best friend who I grew up with in Senegal and Liberia, her family lived in Anniston. And so my best friend...
Which is about an hour from Birmingham.
About an hour from Birmingham, sorry. We graduated together, and then it just made sense for me to come back with her family. My parents stayed in Africa at the time. And so we went to Bible college, and that's where I met Greg. And initially did not think he was all that great because he was kind of wild. It's important to know that I had a very high standard, and it was not all like pure. It was very holier than thou, I will say. I did not mean that to be the case, but that is what it was. And so he had, well, you couldn't have long hair at Bible college, but I just remember it being like wild looking a little bit or something. I don't know. And we went to a Christian concert at Shades Mountain Baptist, big Baptist church, amazing church here in town. And the artist invited people to come up and dance on the stage with her or whatever. And I just thought that was absolutely the worst thing in the world.
For fans of 80s and 90s CCM, it was Kim Boyce.
And dancing was just not something that I thought you were supposed to do. So I was like, oh, he is just wild. He is not sold out for the Lord. Because my story was I was going to marry somebody that wanted to be a missionary, and we would go back to Africa or somewhere just because I didn't really know anything else. And so he also did not feel called to be a missionary. So I was like, well, that's one of the things on my list. And if he doesn't want to be a missionary, I should never even date him. So we had a lot of conversations about this topic because we were trying to get around it, or I was trying to get around it to find a way to date him because I really liked him. So finally he said, it's not that he wouldn't be willing to go. Like if God made it clear that that was what he wanted him to do, then he would do it. And I was like, that'll work. And so we started dating. Got married, and like he said, we went to Louisiana at a Bible church that we loved. The pastor and his wife were just the dearest and still are dearest friends, and had our first kid there. I would say that I was constantly also looking for something. I didn't really know what it was, but my way of like when I felt insecure or just didn't feel like I mattered or had anything to bring to the table, I would just do more things for people or be willing to serve in whatever way was needed. So I didn't feel like that person that could like take charge of something and just make it happen, but I would be very good at filling in these tasks that you needed done because I was very faithful to do that, and I would be on time, and I would be very nice and kind and sweet and all these things. And so that's kind of where I went to like feel like I mattered. It was just ramp up the serving and the being nice. And I wouldn't say it was all with horrible motives, but it was primarily because I didn't feel good about myself, or I really didn't believe who I was in Christ. So I needed people to affirm that I was good.
Well, the fact that it wasn't all for horrible motives is one of the ways I think that makes the unhealthy part so easy to hang on to for so long, right? Because
you're doing good things.
Yeah, you're doing good things, and so it's hard to differentiate between the healthy motivations and then the unhealthy things that we're trying to accomplish through it.
Exactly. And the feeling in my gut, soul, whatever, that was so discontent. I remember like always trying to be with people, or I didn't want to be at home or be by myself at all because I had to like sit with that discontent or loneliness. I had a lot of friends, and I was lonely a lot of the time because I don't think I was as real as I think I always have been. There was a lot that I wasn't being honest about, and some of I just didn't even know. So I just remember a lot of times talking to Greg about how I had all these friends, but I felt so lonely and I couldn't figure it out. And of course he didn't know what to say because he had his own things he was struggling with. So
very hard for me to really be focused on you when, I'm having to be careful in every conversation we have to make sure that I don't, reveal something accidentally that is a secret I'm keeping.
Right. And when he talks about how like miserable it was and hard it was and just, all of those balls he was juggling, like I didn't have a clue what was going on. And so I really didn't even know like to ask questions because again, I grew up in a sheltered environment. I don't think I knew about pornography when we got married. I don't even know that I knew what it was. I certainly hadn't seen anything. And so I just didn't know questions to ask, but I knew like our marriage didn't seem to be what I thought. I didn't really know what it was supposed to be like, but it just seemed like it was lacking, or it was
some
like,
felt
is this
off.
all that it is? Because we're like good friends who like just live in a house together. Excuse me. And so honestly, I never would have imagined all that was going on. But whenever he was caught in 2009 and he started telling me what was going on, it was devastating, and yet what's the word? Validating, because I was like, oh, well, this is why I felt like there was something going. I didn't know there was something going on. It just seemed off, and so it was horrible, horrible. The worst day of my life ever. I think is not an over statement, whatever you would say, an overreaction. It was horrible, but also like, okay, well, now I know. And initially, I mean, the divorce wasn't even an option for me. I just was like, you just don't get divorced. God hates divorce. And so that's just not, we just got to work through this. And I don't know how I'm going to work through it. I might be miserable forever, but we'll have to stay married. So that was kind of not a great start or way of thinking. But I think that initially I did just determine to just go and do the next steps and see where it was going to take us. So that's when we, met our therapist.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question I don't think I've ever asked you before.
Oh, 32 years of marriage. Okay.
Yeah, it just came to me. The whole divorce is not an option, and I know that was a lot of how you were raised.
Mm-hmm.
The whole, when you get married, turn to the page in the dictionary with divorce and rip that page out,
Mm-hmm.
When you think about the way that the last 15 years have been, if you had allowed yourself to seriously consider divorce as one of your options, because obviously I've not met a person so far that would argue that what I had done did not give you biblical grounds, and definitely an understandable reason to divorce me. Had you considered that, do you feel like it would have made your experience in recovery any different? Like, even if you'd chosen to stay with me, I guess what I'm asking is, do you feel like not ever considering it impacted the journey in any kind of a positive or negative way?
Well, I know that not considering it was in part because, I was taught that, and it, God's word does say he hates divorce, but never the part that I don't remember being taught. Maybe I don't remember being taught in certain circumstances that, God loves you more than the institution of marriage, and he wants what's best for you. And so sometimes that may be the course you have to take. I don't remember being taught that, but I think part of why I wouldn't consider it was because it made me panic at the thought of not having you, because being tethered to you was a good part, majority part of why I thought I mattered. Because you were this amazing person. It makes me get a lump in my throat. Actually, you were this amazing person, worship pastor that everybody loved. And there was a lot of that was sincere. You weren't just a total fraud. But if I didn't have you, then what would I have? Because I really did not have value or security in myself, in the Lord. So I don't know if that answers your question, but part of it was that, I didn't have a box for how I would even make it. There's nothing I could do to survive. And then, of course, we had kids. And so I think I remember, though, later, I don't remember how far into recovery, when it hit me, oh my gosh, I totally had every reason in the book that I could have divorced you. And something about that, it was almost like this last little, cage opened up and I felt free. Just at the idea that I actually had, it was bad enough, it was that bad that I could have divorced you. But I didn't regret my choice to stay. It was just knowing that I had the choice. There was something about that was huge. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
I didn't think I had a choice. I guess that's what it was. I didn't know I had choices. I just have to do these things because this is what you do.
Well, I think it's important for you to talk about that, because, and we're not advocating one choice or another when we do, but just so many people who don't feel like they even have options that they actually do.
Well, and the other part that's hard is you were repentant and broken, and how could I divorce you when you're doing the right thing now? And that is a different issue. That doesn't take away the fact that you did the things that would allow me to get divorced if I felt like that's what I needed to do. So that makes it hard for women too. If the husband's kind of, seems like anyway, doing the right things.
Okay, so what was it like for you kind of getting into this process now that we've been in for so long? Because my on-ramp was pretty easy, right? The guy who's the addict in recovery, who like do this, do this, do this. It's much more cut and dried. But 15 years ago, there wasn't all that much going on for recovering sex addicts. I mean, there were some communities and some help, not as much as there is now, but probably arguably even less for partners. Yeah. And so what was that beginning of that journey like for you?
You'll probably have to do some beeps here, but I was effing pissed because you dumped this load of shite. I say shite because it doesn't sound like as much of a swear word on me, and then you're as free as a bird. Like I remember you, and I understand now, and even then I could understand like how you must feel to have this burden lifted, and you aren't keeping secrets, and you're not hiding from me anymore, and I'm still here. And I was glad in some senses because I'm glad that like we're actually working on something, and I felt actually closer to you because I knew all the things, but all the things I knew were horrible. And so I was so grateful and so pissed that you were doing all the right things, like going to group and doing, you were repentant. Like I wanted it, but it was also making me angry. So, and I was encouraged to call somebody and talk to somebody who might understand. I'm like, I ain't talking to some sex addict's wife. I'm not going to be that person. But I was that person. And so, like, I just didn't want to do it. And I was so angry. And finally, I was like, well, screw this. This isn't working. I guess I'll call her. And then that started really my journey of taking care of myself and facing things, not just always focused on your recovery and your addiction and all of that. So a lot of women get really angry when they hear the codependent word or hear that there's things that are like dysfunctional in their life. But for me, it was freeing because I was like, oh, I can focus on this instead of Greg's stuff. And I didn't know that you could actually say no to people when they ask you to do something. I thought if you look at your calendar and you have a free hour and you can do it, you have to do it because that's serving and sacrificing. And so I was learning, like, you don't have to say yes to everything. So, yeah, I was basically glad and very, very, very angry at the same time.
So then what?
So then I did finally call this girl, and we started going through a book, and it just one more person would come each week, another person, and then there was a ministry that was started, and that was, well, I would say for a good year, I was angry every week that I had to go to this stupid group with all these women who are so mad and sad, and it was horrible. And yet every night when I came home, I felt better. Yeah. And that made me mad because I was like, damn it, it's helping, but I don't go.
I wasn't quick enough with the bleed.
Another bleed. Sorry, y'all. This is how it was in the beginning, and still I kind of swear sometimes. But it was horrible. It was horrible. And yet, yeah, every time I went, it was, another way of just like having community and being with other women who understood. I didn't have to explain. If I was upset or mad about something, I didn't have to explain. They didn't look at me like I was weird. No offense to people who haven't gone through this, but if you don't know what somebody's gone through, and there are things that people have gone through that I don't understand, and I'm sure I look at them like they've got horns growing out of their head. But there is something that is just so valuable to sit with women who understand. Even now, when I talk with a woman who's brand new, and I'm 15 years in, I am encouraged to sit with her and feel some kind of bonding with her because she and I share the same pain. So, it was I would say a very rough start of my recovery, but the community piece was probably what, like, you say you were like in a slingshot, and when you got exposed, you just it flew you into recovery or whatever. And that's how I feel when I started going to group. Like, that's what really started helping me to start to heal.
Yeah.
So here we are.
Talk just a little bit, and I know, we're not getting into everything, but talk a little bit about when other women would start to call.
Oh, yeah. I think that I remember this one friend as the first person who called me. I think it was about 8 months into recovery, and we had told our therapist, like, if you talk to anybody, that it would help for them to talk to somebody that's been in ministry or have things in common, then you can give them our name. Well, this wasn't somebody that our therapist had, said to call us. This was a friend, but she had just found out that her husband had an affair, had been having an affair. And her sister actually was the one. She's like, you might want to call Stacey because I think she might understand. And so when she called me, the details may have been different as far as what we were both going through, what our spouses had done. But when I was talking to her, and she was basically like just expressing how it was to talk to somebody who understood just how life-giving that was, I realized in that moment, I thought, I never would have imagined a ministry. Listen, this was not what I thought we would be doing. But I remember thinking I could see how God could use this horrible, horrible thing to help somebody else. And that made it feel in some ways worth it.
Yeah. So kind of wrapping up, at least for right now, how has what the last, 12 to 15 years of your life and what that's looked like, how has that helped you discover what it is that you really want?
How old was I when we started this when 2009? I can't do the math.
37.
37?
Yep.
So when I was 37 years old, this blew up. And I would say, excuse me, when getting into recovery, I would say probably when I started talking with other women, when they would call, that's when I realized for the first time, I think this is what God has created me for, is to meet women in this horrible, horrible place, which is...
And when you met them in that horrible place, what did that allow you to experience and help them experience? So
there was a couple of things. First of all, there's no pride in saying, yeah, me too. My husband's a recovering sex addict. Who wants to boast about that?
Be in that club?
Yeah, ain't nobody want to be in that club. We joke all the time in our recovery group. We wish we'd met at a book club. One lady came though recently, and she's like, well, I'm in a book club and I'm in a cooking class, and here I am. So we just have to laugh. You have to laugh sometimes. But yeah, there's no boasting in it. So it's not like I can really get any, I don't know what the word is, accolades or whatever for being the wife of a recovering sex addict. But the other thing is, I think just for the first time, I really felt like me being who I am, just real. And I don't have degrees or all this stuff behind my name to give me this, what's the word? Words are hard this morning. To give me like, oh, you get to talk about this because you are so qualified.
Yeah.
My qualification is that I have been through it.
Yep.
And so I don't know. I just feel like I settled into, God created me to be able to sit and hold space with women, not tell them what to do. Because growing up, I felt like I always had to have an answer. If anybody ever shared anything, I had to have a scripture real quick. So that was a learning thing for me. Like, I don't have to have the answers. I don't have to tell them what to do. I just sit with them. And it feels like you're doing nothing, and yet they haven't experienced people who can sit with them without throwing the Bible verses. And that sounds heretical to me sometimes to say, don't throw out scripture. But in the moment of you're in a crater, that isn't the thing to do. We sit with people, and then later we can talk scripture and all of that. But so does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it's great.
I think being me and sitting with them. I'm not scared in those moments. I don't feel inadequate, but I also don't feel super confident. God just takes over, and I just experience that in a real way, like no other way.
All right, we're going to close out episode 1 right here, and we will continue our conversation in episode 2. On that episode, Bobby West is going to share his story, and then we'll spend some time talking about what we really want to see come out of this podcast. We believe that focusing on healthy connections is crucial to a life of recovery and surrender, and we want to help you get a vision of what that life could look like, a life where you discover what you really want. That episode's available right now, so we hope you'll continue listening, and while you're at it, maybe go ahead and give us a 5-star review. We'll see you next time.